hey, sticker. How did I forget about that? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. You guys are in for a treat today. This might be the second best video of the year that I upload on my channel. We're gonna be ranking my eyeshadow palettes today, specifically all the eyeshadow palettes from 2023 that I have tried out so far. It's kind of a midway through the year review. I saw Samantha March do this a couple of years ago and I thought, that is genius. Why do this type of video just once a year? And it's been a tradition ever since. So we're gonna do that today. I have all of the 18 eyeshadow palettes that I've tried out so far this year here in front of me, all ranked from least to most favorite. And these are all the palettes that had 6 or more shades in them. Should be fun. Hope you guys are excited. Before we get into the palettes, I want to give a very special welcome to any of you that are new here at my channel. Thank you so much for joining. Hope you enjoy today's video. Make sure that you subscribe before you leave and hit that notification bell so that you know each time I upload a new video. And with that said, let's get right to the ranking. So we're going to start at the bottom with my least favorite and count up. I will be swatching just the top 5 palettes for you guys. So I'll throw in some close-ups once we get a little higher in the rankings. Let's get started with palette number 18. I have to go with the Pacifica Purple Nudes eyeshadow palette. This was sent to me along with another palette from Pacifica early in the year. I want to say about in January. I was not very impressed with these. Number one, I'm not usually into this type of a color story, although I might contradict myself later in this video, but normally I don't often reach for cool toned purples, but more than anything, it wasn't the color story of this palette, it was the formula. I didn't think it was the best formula to apply and it faded from my eyes. That almost never happens to me. Even when an eyeshadow palette's a little bit tricky to work with, usually they don't just disappear. But I got a pretty strong purple look with this initially, and by about the end of the day, 5 or 6 hours later, I couldn't see those purples on my eyes anymore. They just completely faded off. So I was really disappointed with this one. It's not a cheap palette, even though I didn't purchase it on my own. I think it's like $14, and I was just not that impressed with these eyeshadows. They've had some other good stuff, but the eyeshadows, not so much. Which I also have to say about the Cocoa Nudes palette. This is ranked at number 17. I like the color story of this one better. I don't know that I experienced the same fading that I did with the purple. That might also have just been that these are more nude shades, so it wasn't quite as obvious. I still didn't love it though. I didn't love the formulas inside here. Most of these are mattes, which is not a bad thing. And then they had this kind of bizarre shade that almost feels like it should be like a cream to powder formula like you might get in a Natasha Denona palette, but it wasn't quite as pigmented, wasn't as easy to use. Some of the matte browns I thought were decent, but that said, I have a lot of matte browns in my collection that I think are superior, and for $14.99, I think you can find a much better nude eyeshadow palette. Sorry, Pacifica. Moving on up to number 16. This is where I start to feel a little bit bad because most of these I like to some extent. For number 16, I'm gonna have to go with the Milani Gilded Mini palette. This I feel like should be ranked higher. It's a very good palette. I was not unimpressed with any of the formulas in this palette. I thought the color story was even very nice. But what I found is I used this in a video. I was pretty impressed with it. And then I left it on my desk for the next like month and a half. And I think I only reached for it by force one more time. And it's been very forgotten by me. And even though the formula is good and I don't think the color story is bad, I feel like there's maybe a reason for that. I don't know what that reason is. Probably more than likely it's just because I have a lot of other things and something has to really win my heart for me to want to reach for it again. And this one just didn't do that for me. Sadly, it is possible if for some reason I pull this back out and use it a little bit more, it could grow on me because I thought the formulas were really nice. But it's just been very neglected and just hasn't stood out very much to me. So had to give it a lower ranking today. For number 15, I'm gonna go with the Unleasha Glitterpedia eyeshadow palette. I actually kind of liked this eyeshadow palette. There was a couple weeks after I tried this out that I've reached for this a ton. I think it's good. The mattes are really good. By the way, this palette comes from a K-beauty brand. I got it from YesStyle. I have had some really interesting experiences with eyeshadow palettes from K-beauty brands over the years. I think their formulas are okay, but particularly their shimmer formulas are not like what you typically get from a like metallic or a shimmer formula from some Western brands. It's not that they're bad, they're just a little bit different. So this palette is really pretty. I like the color story. Some of the shimmers I thought were pretty good. These two shimmers right here have some very chunky glitters in them, and normally I just don't like chunky glitter. It looks like craft glitter on the eyes. I feel like, I mean, I'm 40 years old. I kind of feel like it's a little odd for me to put craft glitter on my eyes at this age. I don't mind glitter, I just don't like chunky glitter, and these were quite chunky. Other than those, I thought most of the other shades were really nice. I really liked this very sheer, kind of shimmery, creamy glitter topper that has this like multi-dimensional sparkle in it. It's really beautiful. The reason it's getting a lower ranking, other than just some stiff competition, are the glitter shades, and also it was a little pricey. Normally I go to EYESHADOW and try out K-Beauty stuff to find really cheap finds there, because I found so many good, cheap, affordable finds from K-Beauty brands. This one was a little bit on the pricey side, and sometimes eyeshadow palettes can be. I want to say it was around $15, which isn't terrible, but I know if this was more like $8, I probably would have liked it a little bit more. I'm sorry, but it's true. Number 14, I'm gonna go with the Huda Beauty Warm Matte Obsessions palette. This is a good palette. It's just very, very orange and a lot of repetition in here. I think the repetition more than the orange is what bumps this down a couple spots perhaps. The formulas are great. It's not the formulas that I'm disappointed in this palette. Just don't love the orange. I might like it a little bit more in the fall when I'm really into my rusty tones. I'm not gonna declutter it. I do like this enough to where I don't think it's gonna face any sort of declutter, at least not in the near future. I do love the cream formulas in here that you get in both this and the other palette. They perform really well. They're really nice and rich. They didn't crease on me, which is a major bonus, and the main reason I was excited to try these. But I just wish the repetition wasn't in here. I know I've said it before, but these two shades and these two shades on my eyes look almost identical, and I feel like that's just a bit of a waste. That brings us to number 13. I'm going with the Pat McGrath Sublime Smoke Mini Palette. I'm sad to be ranking this one so low because there are some major good things about this palette. It's really everything except for this corner shade right here, and it's not even that that shade is like a bad shade, it's just not the right tone for me. It has a lot of yellow in it. It has this sparkle in it that's very yellow. I can't quite explain it. It's more of a yellow shift than a gold shift. I don't mind something that's warmer on my inner eye, like a warm champagne that even has a touch of gold in it. But if that gold is too yellow toned, it just looks really bad on my skin tone. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just my preference, but this particular shade I don't like on my eyes, and I wish it was more of just a traditional champagne. The funny thing is, if that one change was made in this palette, this would probably be in my top 5 because I love the formula. I love Pat McGrath's both shimmer and matte formula. The other browns in here are phenomenal, but every time I use this and I get to that inner corner shade, I'm just really disappointed, and I end up just wanting to reach for something else. It doesn't quite work for me, and it's an expensive palette for how tiny it is. $29. Pat McGrath makes me much more picky with her palettes than I otherwise would be. Coming in at number 12, I'm gonna go with the Lottie London Rose Golds palette. This palette looks kind of boring. When I first got this, I was kind of like, meh. Like it just kind of, the color story looks kind of bland. Nothing's too light or too dark. The shimmers in the pan don't even look that metallic or sparkly. But this creates some really, really beautiful eye looks if you like neutrals that aren't overly smoky and look a little bit more natural. This is kind of for like the girl that likes to wear makeup but doesn't like to look like she's wearing makeup. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a very natural palette, but it's very beautiful. I reached for this a ton the month after I got it, to the point where it started to surprise me how much I really ended up liking this one, because I wasn't really expecting to. I ended up throwing this into my cart because it was on sale on Ulta's website. I don't even think you can get this there anymore. You may be able to find it on the Lottie London website, but I was pretty impressed with these. They wear really well, they blend really nicely, the shimmers are really nice and reflective, but also kind of sheer, which makes them very suitable for anyone that has more lines or texture on their eyelids. They're a little more forgiving. I just really like it. It's a beautiful little palette if you like your very, very basic neutrals. Ranked at number 11, I'm gonna go with the Hello Berlin palette from Essence. This is another palette that I foresee could climb higher in the rankings once we get closer to fall. This color story gives me very fall toned vibes, so it's just not a color story that I feel inclined to reach for in the spring and summertime. And I did try this out in the spring. I loved it. I used it a couple of times, but it's just not the color story that I feel myself like gravitating towards right now. But I thought the formula's really nice. The mattes I thought were better than the shimmers. The shimmers were good, but they weren't like showstopper shimmers. They weren't overly sparkly or dimensional, but they were nice. They were smoothing. They brought a little bit of light to your eyes. The shades were all great. They wore well on me. I just generally like a little bit more punch in my shimmers. But that said, if you are someone that's a little bit older and you like more of a natural eye look, I think you probably would love these shimmers. They're almost like a slightly less quality version of the Persona shimmers is kind of what they reminded me of. But really fun palette. I love the cover art on this. I think it's so like kind of grungy and cute. I don't know, I think it's so cute and it perfectly matches the color story inside. Really fun palette, and again, I think I'll love this a lot more come the fall. On to number 10. This one kind of pains me. It's the Pat McGrath Mothership Iconic Infatuation palette. I really talked myself into buying this one because I love Pat McGrath's eyeshadow formula. I have a couple of her palettes that I've just really fallen in love with, and anytime she comes out with something new, even though her eyeshadows are obnoxiously expensive, they always catch my attention, and I always am interested in them. This is one of those cases. I basically looked at this color story and thought, that is a perfect berry toned color story, which I actually think is true. I still think this is like a perfect berry tone color story, but it was very expensive. This thing was 65 bucks for just 6 shades. That is so expensive in my mind and in my thinking, especially considering her really large palettes that have incredible packaging. I mean, they feel like $1 million bucks. You can usually find those on sale if you really catch things at the right time for around like $80-ish, which is not that much more expensive than this thing was. And those are way better. I only have one of them, but the quality of those shimmers in particular, they're extra special. These are kind of just more basic shadows. The color story I even think is a little bit more basic. I know that I own shades like this within my collection already. And while they're beautiful and they perform well, I just think it was a little bit maybe overpriced, a little bit overrated, maybe not overrated. I don't know that I heard a ton of hype about this, but in my mind, I think I overrated or overestimated how much I would like this. At number 9, I'm gonna go with the Viseart Petite Pro San Francisco palette. This palette is really good. I was very impressed with the Viseart quality. This was my first try at a Viseart palette. There are a couple reasons that I think this one's ranking a little bit lower than I maybe would have expected it to, or maybe you would expect it to if you're a Viseart fan. First off, this color story, kind of like with the Essence palette, screams fall to me. So I imagine I'll be more inclined to reach for this once fall rolls around. But I have to say, you guys, this palette was a little bit forgotten by me, and I think it's because of its size. I'm not quite sure why that is. I had it in a couple different places to kind of remind myself to get some more use out of this. I did take it away for a weekend a couple months ago traveling, and I really enjoyed it. But since then, I've had it like set around a couple different places on my desk, and it ends up kind of getting pushed aside and behind things and just overlooked because it's so tiny. Now, you would think that would hold true also with the Pat McGrath, which I don't necessarily feel like these ones were really forgotten, but as I was doing my list today, I actually forgot to include this one as I was going through my old videos. After I'd already ranked everything, I realized, oh, I forgot about that Viseart palette. I ended up having to go in and kind of plug this in somewhere. I went with kind of a middle ranking. I think the quality is great. They are kind of pricey. I mean, pretty pricey, kind of like the Pat McGrath ones. For what you get, these are quite expensive. I'm kind of interested in picking up one different color story, maybe something more with like pinks and peaches in it. But that said, they are very expensive, and for how much product you get, it just makes me a little bit more critical, a little bit more reluctant. So hopefully this one will grow on me a little bit more, but for now I'm kind of leaving it right in the middle of the pack. Coming in at number 8, I'm gonna go with the Alter Ego Midsummer palette. This is a dupe for the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette, which is one of my very favorite palettes. Now, my ranking for this palette has a bit of an asterisk next to it. I ended up ranking this one at the number 8 spot because I already own the original palette, so I don't use this one very much. I used it in a video where I did a comparison, which if you're curious to see how that went, I posted that video about a month ago, and I thought it performed really well. This was very comparable to the ABH palette, and the Nouveau palette is one of my very favorites. I think it came into my top 3 in 2022. I love that palette. I love the color story, and this one I thought was just as good. Very similar result. I think Alter Ego does really good quality for being dupe palettes or more affordable palettes. They wear really well on me. They're easy to build and to blend. Their shimmers are really nice. Nothing noticeably fades off on me. I imagine if I didn't own the original, this would rank a lot higher, probably in my top 5. I think the color story is one of the best in my collection. All around, a really great palette, more affordable than the ABH, but because I own the original, that's why this one ended up in the middle. Ranked at number 7, I'm gonna go with the ColourPop Fresh Greens palette. This is another palette that I can foresee growing on me or climbing in the rankings maybe once we get into the fall. I reach for this quite a bit in the spring, mostly for like this section of shades right here, this mint green, and then these shimmers right here. You guys, these shimmers, let me just swatch them for you. I know this technically isn't in my top 5, but they are absolutely stunning and special. So pretty. I love especially this like silvery green. These are the kind of shades that I just, I don't know, I'm just very attracted to. I love them. It's not a natural palette by any means. Like the eye looks that you get out of this are very glamorous. The greens are definitely green and the shimmers are very bold and show-stopping, but if you don't mind that, I think you're gonna love this. Number 6, I'm gonna go with the BH Cosmetics Lost in Los Angeles palette. If you're into color, this will be the palette of your dreams. It is so much fun. Now there are some shades in here that I'm not very inclined to reach for. I'll probably never reach for a shade like this blue right here. I'll probably rarely reach for some of these bold like purples, but the corals in here, some of the lid shimmers, this matte white, even this like minty green are so much fun. I've had so much fun playing with this. That said, this is more like a supplemental palette for me. This is not a palette I'm likely to reach to for a complete eye look. I'm actually wearing this lid shimmer just on the inner corner of my eyes today, along with something else that we'll talk about in a minute. But I do love it in combination with something, especially maybe like a more neutral palette. It's a really fun one to reach for a pop of color in your crease or a shimmer on the eye. That's different than what you might normally reach for. It's very, very fun. And that brings us to the top 5. So I will insert swatches with each of these palettes for you guys. Starting with number 5, I had to go with the Huda Beauty Cool Matte Obsessions palette. This one, they hit the nail on the head with this palette. The color story is great. You don't get the repetition in this one that I felt you kind of got in the Warm palette. The formulas are incredible. This is the palette that I'm wearing on the outer half of my eyes today. It is stunning. If you like something more cool toned that leans a little bit purple, but they're more muted purples, they're not super bold, they create some of the prettiest eye looks. Most everything in here is cool toned, but you also get this pop of warmth right here. If you want a little bit of warmth in your look, which is what I did today, I actually started with some of the cool tones, and then I found that they were kind of clashing with my cheek color and my lip color. So I threw a little bit of this warmer rose color into my crease, and it just warmed them up just enough. It is stunning. You can get the prettiest soft feminine purpley pink looks out of this, or a lot more dimension, a lot more depth and richness with some of these shades right here. I love the cream shadows in here and building on top of those with these deep mattes. Beautiful. That said, this is a palette that I'm very unlikely to reach for on its own because I'm addicted to shimmer, so I'll always grab something else to throw on my lid, even if it's just my highlighter. It's really great. If you like purple tones like this, like cooler, muted, kind of dusty mauve kind of purple shades, I think you're gonna love this palette. The quality is phenomenal. Ranked at number 4, I'm gonna go with the Alter Ego Coastal palette. This palette kind of shocked me after I got it. I was never very interested in the original of this palette, so this palette is meant to dupe the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette, which honestly I didn't even know existed before they sent me this palette, by the way. This one was sent to me. And when I opened it up, I kind of thought there's probably a lot of shades in here that aren't very me, but as I played with it, this thing grew on me. This is unlike any other color story that I own, which is maybe why I kind of underestimated it. Maybe I didn't realize I was looking for a bit of a change. I don't normally reach for cooler toned purples, blue toned purples, or even like bluey duochromes very often, but these are stunning, you guys. You get so much variety in this palette, but they're interesting and different from what I typically reach for, especially when it comes to pinks and purples. I usually prefer warmer kind of berry tones, but these have been so much fun. I've been very impressed with so many different eye looks from this. You get a couple of warm shades in here, or maybe I should say warmer. They're not necessarily warm, they're just not quite as cool as everything else. You get some beautiful basic shimmers, you get some duochromes in here. It's such a fun and interesting palette. I've created so many looks out of this that I've just been really impressed with that I didn't think were looks that I would normally get along with. I am a big fan of the Alter Ego formula. I think they do a great job. For something that's a fraction of the price, I think the Huda Beauty version of this palette is probably above $60. It might even be like $70. This one I think is closer to $20. So much more affordable, very good quality. I've been very impressed with it. They wear well, and just a really fun palette to play with. Ranked at number 3, I'm gonna go with the Juvia's Place, the Coffee Shop palette. Now, you look at this palette and you might think it looks kind of basic. Maybe it looks a little bit rich and smoky. Maybe that's why I love it so much. You might know I'm a big fan of rich, smoky browns, especially from Juvia's Place. This is full of them, and in every variety. You get every variety of a bronze tone in this palette that you might ever want. You even get some cool tones in here. Most of them lean a little bit on the warm side, which I love. I love a warm bronzy look, but you get some cooler tone bronzes, some coppery bronzes, some cooler tone shimmers. You get some warm mattes, some cool mattes. You can create so many different bronze looks with this palette. I absolutely love it. Some are more orange toned, some are yellow, some are a little more gray. It's just a really fun one, and it's the formula that I fell in love with Juvia's Place for. Kind of like their old school formula in their Nubian 2 palette, their Magic Mini. They did some formulas in their 6-pan palettes and in some of their newer palettes where they experimented with some different shimmers. Sometimes I didn't love all of the formulas. I didn't love the pressed glitters. These are just traditional, good quality metallics that perform really well. They show up really well. They last really well. If you're into your warm bronzes, This is great. I'm curious to know, for those of you that own this palette and also own the original Warrior, I don't actually own that one, which still kind of shocks me. That's like one of their best-selling palettes. But I'd love to know which one you prefer. I imagine this one has more variety, but let me know if you like that one even better. I might just have to pick that one up too. Ranked at number 2. This one, I feel like I did a 180. It is the BH Cosmetics Amalfi Coast palette. So when I first talked about this palette in the video where I tried out some other BH Cosmetics products, I kind of underrated this one a little bit because initially the first time I tried this, I'd only tried it like once at that point. I thought the color story was a little bit repetitive. I felt like it kind of already looked like some palettes that I own, even from BH Cosmetics. It did remind me a little bit of the Hawaii palette, but I have found myself reaching into this more and more and really coming to love this one. It is so pretty. It still surprises me how much I like this palette because I look at it and I think, well, it just looks like most of the looks would come out the same, but there's more variety in here than it appears. I know I just got done saying basically the same thing about this palette, but this one is deceivingly versatile and creative. The looks that come out of this, they're the type of looks that later in the day when I catch myself in the mirror, when I'm washing my hands or something, I'm kind of wowed by. Like my eye look is just really impeccable. They look high quality. Like these give me Natasha Denona finished look vibes as far as just how everything comes together in the end and how much richness and dimension and the sparkle quality of these shimmers. There's a reason I put BH Cosmetics in my affordable makeup that performs as good as high-end. I can't remember what that video was titled, but that is the reason why. I absolutely love this palette. It's really surprised me how much this has climbed up in the rankings. Because initially when I got this, I was kind of like, been there, done that, but it's special. It is very, very special. And that leaves us with my number 1 eyeshadow palette. I have to go with the Sydney Grace Unbreakable Bond palette. Probably doesn't surprise you guys. Sydney Grace can do no wrong in my mind. I mean, they curate some of the best palettes. You know I love their formula, both their mattes and their shimmers, especially their shimmers. I know I say this every time I talk about their palettes, but again, in case you haven't been here for that long, the Sydney Grace shimmer formula, if you like your shimmers to be truly metallic, like liquefied metal, they are amazing. They are so, so stunning. This is such a fun color story. You get a lot of pink and peach in here, and then this like interesting pop here in the corner. I've found that I really love palettes that do this. I talked recently about a Natasha Denona one. I think it was, which one was it? And it was the Zendo palette where you have like some more monochromatic things, and then you have this corner that like throws things in a different direction. Kind of similar thing with this palette right here. You kind of get some like warmer pinks and peaches and like golds over here. And then you have this cooler toned corner right here that's really fun to pair with some of these other shades, or even just stick with just the cool tones all on their own. Maybe like these 4 and like this transition shade, you're gonna get a beautiful cool tone look out of. Just take a look at this silver right here, you guys. I mean, I'll insert the swatches for you guys so you can see how these look swatch. And I'm telling you guys, every time I do swatches, if I'm ever doing a Sydney Grace swatch, they swatch better than any other formula ever. They are so impactful and rich and pigmented and intense. They almost feel like creams, but they're not a cream formula, but they perform kind of like this, just that really insane metallic foil. Now, if you are intimidated by that type of a foil, you can use these with a brush and get more of like a soft shimmer effect. You don't have to go full aluminum foil on your eyes, but I love that. And I love that that option is there. Fantastic, fun color story. It's not the most unique color story. I actually think this is somewhat similar to the XO palette other than just these blues down here, but that said, I'm not going to complain. And I think if you don't have a lot from them and you like your pinks and peaches, you will love this color story, and more than anything, you will love the formula. And that is it, you guys. Those are all the palettes I've tried out in 2023 ranked. Let me know what you guys thought of this one. Did any of these rankings surprise you? Some of them even surprised me as I was going through and kind of shuffling things and putting things in their proper place. I typically do a full year's ranking video at the end of the year, so I'm curious to see if these all hold their place. Usually some things will shift a little bit, so we shall see. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I hope that you're enjoying my full month of nothing new. Just a couple more videos to go, so let that be a reminder. Make sure you're subscribed before you leave, and I will see all of you in my next video. Bye. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you are here in the winter in 6 months when that video is up. What a spoiler, Mandy. Way to hook 'em.